The heat of the Sahel in 1732 didn't just bake the earth, it fermented the air with the scent of impending change. In the heart of the Jolof Empire, Princess Penda stood atop the red clay ramparts, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the savannah met the sky. She wasn't looking for invaders. She was looking for a ghost. Or rather, the man the court called a ghost because he walked in shadows where others feared to tread. That man was Samba. Samba was a warrior of the plains, a man whose lineage was as long as the river Senegal, but whose pockets were empty of the gold the king demanded for his daughter's hand. He rode toward the palace gates with a quiet, lethal grace. Below the balcony, the market square was a riot of indigo fabrics and polished copper. But the princess saw none of it. Her world narrowed down to the way Samba dismounted his horse, stiffly, as if carrying the weight of a secret. He looked up, and for a heartbeat the noise of the empire faded into a hum. He didn't wave, he didn't smile. He simply touched his hand to his chest, a silent promise that he had returned from the borderlands alive. But their silence was broken by the arrival of the Burba, the king. He stepped onto the terrace, his heavy robes trailing behind him like the weight of duty itself. He reminded his daughter that a princess does not marry for love. She marries for the survival of the bloodline. The king spoke of a rival lord from the south, a man who offered 1,000 cattle and a mountain of ivory for Penda. He said that Samba was nothing but a soldier of the dust, a man who would lead her to a life of hardship and hunger. Penda replied that hunger with Samba was a feast, while a palace with the rival lord was a prison. The king's face darkened, but he gave his daughter a choice, a trial of the heart that would begin at dusk. News traveled fast through the clay corridors. Samba met Penda in the sacred baobab grove as the first stars began to pierce the purple sky. The air was thick with the scent of wild jasmine and wood smoke. Samba took her hands in his palms rough from the spear and the reins. He told her he had found a path through the desert to the coastal kingdoms, a place where they could be free. But the journey was deadly. He warned her that if they left tonight, they could never return. The Jolof crown would be lost to her forever. Penda looked at the palace lights in the distance, and then back into Samba's eyes. She told him that his heart was the only kingdom she ever wanted to rule. They knew the king's scouts were already saddling their horses. They had less than an hour to disappear into the tall grass. They rode double on Samba's stallion, the animal's hooves muffled by the soft sand. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the night. Penda held onto Samba's waist, her cheek pressed against his leather armor. Behind them, the sound of rhythmic drumming began to echo from the palace walls. It was the signal for the hunt. The king had not waited for dawn. He had unleashed his personal guard to bring his daughter back. Samba steered the horse toward the river, the great Senegal. The water was a black mirror, swirling with hidden currents and the eyes of predators. He knew if they could cross here, the scent would be lost to the hounds. The horse stumbled in the muck, and Penda cried out as the cold water surged up to her waist. Samba pulled her closer, his voice a low, steady growl, telling her to trust the beast and trust the water. They reached the far bank just as the first torches appeared on the side they had left. The king's men shouted across the void, their voices drowned out by the rushing water. They were safe, for now, but the escape had taken its toll. The horse was spent and the sun was beginning to bleed over the horizon, exposing them to anyone wandering the trade routes. They needed shelter. They found a small hut abandoned by salt traders years ago. Inside, the air was stale, but it provided a sanctuary from the rising heat. Penda removed her wet silk and wrapped herself in Samba's dry traveling cloak. Samba knelt by the door, his eyes scanning the horizon for the dust clouds of a pursuit. He hadn't slept in 2 days, his grip on his spear never loosening. Penda walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. She told him that even if they were caught, she would never regret this night. She would rather be a fugitive in his arms than a queen in a loveless bed. As midday hit, the sound of galloping hooves returned, not from the river but from the north. A patrol of the king's cavalry had circled around the hills. Samba knew he couldn't outrun them on a tired horse. He looked at Penda and told her to hide in the tall grass behind the hut. He would draw them away, leading them on a chase toward the coast. Penda refused. She said that if they were to face the king's justice, they would face it together. She stepped out into the blinding sun just as the cavalry surrounded the small hut. The commander of the guard, a man whose life Penda had once saved in a palace skirmish, pulled his horse to a halt. He looked at the princess, then at the warrior standing before her like a shield. The commander drew his sword, and for a moment it seemed the story would end in blood. But then, he did something no one expected. He turned to his men and shouted that there was no one here. He lied for them. The cavalry turned their horses, riding back into the heat haze they had come from. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise of the chase. Samba dropped his spear into the sand. He turned to Penda and pulled her into a crushing embrace. They were no longer royalty and soldier. They were just two souls, adrift but finally free. They spent the next month traveling by night, eating fruit from the trees and whatever Samba could hunt with his remaining strength. They reached the coastal villages where the air tasted of salt and the empire's reach was thin. In a small fishing village, far from the red clay walls of their birth, they started a new life. Penda, once a woman who had servants for every need, now learned to mend nets and dry fish in the sun. Samba became a protector of the village, using his skills as a warrior to ward off bandits. In the evenings, they would sit on the white sand watching the Atlantic waves crash against the shore. One day, a merchant from the interior brought news. The Jolof Empire was changing, its power fracturing as the years passed. The king had never stopped looking for them, but he had grown old and tired. Penda felt a twinge of sadness for her father, but it was eclipsed by the joy of the life she had built. She looked at the small, humble hut they called home and realized she had never been richer. In the winter of 1739, a small wooden boat arrived with a message of gold leaf. It was a final gift from the king, acknowledging his daughter's choice before he passed into the next world. The story of Penda and Samba became a legend in the West African plains. A story of a love that was stronger than crowns, more resilient than thirst, and as eternal as the sun setting over the Sahel.